The credit card statement sprawled across my kitchen counter like a guilty secret. $18,500. Wedding expenses for my daughter Emily's big day, florists, caterers, that ridiculous champagne fountain. She'd insisted on all charged to the card I'd naively added her to just for emergencies, back when she was still in college. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. Petal and Vine Florist, $3,750. The Grand Ballroom at Willow Creek, $9,200. Gourmet Bites Catering, $5,550. Each charge felt like another stitch in the financial straitjacket tightening around my retirement. At 63, with my teacher's pension and the modest life insurance from my late husband Michael, I should have known better. The house echoed with silence, the kind that settles when you realize your children see you as an ATM rather than a mother. Michael's favorite recliner still faced the bay window untouched since his passing. I'd kept everything frozen in time, as if preserving the past could somehow fill the present emptiness. My phone lit up with a text from Emily. "Mom, can you grab groceries? Tyler and I are swamped with final wedding prep. Just get the usual stuff." Tasks. The casual dismissal stung, as if $18,500 vanished into thin air meant nothing, as if I were nothing. I was halfway through calculating how many years it would take to pay this off on my $3,000 monthly pension when the garage door groaned open. My son Jason barged in his gym bag, dripping rainwater onto the hardwood floors. "Hey, Ma, I need your SUV tonight," he announced, already rummaging through the fridge. "Layla and I are checking out that loft in Soho." Layla, his latest flame, a self-proclaimed spiritual guide who'd turned my sunroom into a jungle of incense and singing bowls. Last week, she'd cleansed my china cabinet with sage smoke, triggering my asthma so badly I wound up in urgent care. When I'd mentioned it, Jason rolled his eyes. "God, Mom, it's not the 1950s. Negative energy is worse than secondhand smoke." Now he stood there in the $200 sneakers I'd bought him for his birthday, tapping his foot impatiently. Something inside me snapped. "Jason Michael Carter." I said, my voice sharp enough to make him look up. "Sit down. We need to talk about what family actually means." For the first time in years, I saw a flicker of uncertainty cross his face. Outside, the rain intensified, hammering against the windows like the universe itself was holding its breath. I slid the credit card statement across the marble countertop, the same counter Michael had installed for our 20th anniversary. "Did you know about this?" Jason's eyes darted to the numbers, then fixed on the fridge like it held state secrets. A nervous tic he'd had since 3rd grade when he'd broken my favorite vase. "Know about what?" "Your sister charged $18,500 to my card for her wedding." He shrugged, popping a grape into his mouth. "Yeah, she said you guys talked about it. Relax, Mom, it's just money. You're always so uptight about finances." The grape stem landed in the sink with a wet plop. "Just money," my voice cracked. "This is my retirement cushion, Jason. The money from your father's—" "Emily will pay you back," he interrupted, scrolling through his phone. "Besides, you've got the house. And isn't that what pensions are for—" I gripped the edge of the counter, staring at this 6-foot-tall stranger wearing my son's face, the boy I'd worked double shifts to send to baseball camp, the man whose DUI I'd quietly paid for last year. Suddenly, I remembered the bridal shower. "When's Emily's bridal brunch?" I asked sweetly. Jason's thumb froze mid-scroll. Sunday. At noon, at that new bistro she loves." "Yeah, no, wait," he flushed. "They actually moved it to Saturday. Private room at the Ivy." "How nice." My smile felt like shattered glass. I suppose the invitation got lost in the mail. The silence thickened. Outside, Layla's wind chimes tinkled mockingly from the sunroom. Jason shifted his weight, suddenly fascinated by his designer sneakers, the ones I'd bought after he'd complained his coworkers judged his Payless shoes. Emily wanted something small, just the bridal party and, younger energy. I exhaled sharply through my nose. Younger energy. Code for not you. The final piece clicked into place, the forgotten Mother's Day, the accidentally muted family group chat, the way Emily always scheduled our lunches during her errands. My fingers found the pendant around my neck, Michael's last birthday gift to me, and the wedding. My voice was eerily calm. Will there be room for my older energy there? Jesus, Mom. Jason rolled his eyes. Of course you're invited. Stop being so dramatic. The microwave clock ticked to 6:30 p.m. Somewhere down the street, a neighbor laughed a warm, carefree sound that made my chest ache. Keys are on the hook, I said, turning toward the window. Don't wake me when you come in. As Jason grabbed the keys, his phone buzzed. I caught a glimpse of Emily's text, "Tell Mom. We need another 2 colors for the photo booth upgrade. She won't say no if you ask while she's tired." The door slammed. The wind chimes laughed. And in that moment, something inside me broke clean in two. I walked to Michael's recliner, still smelling faintly of his cologne, and opened my laptop. The screen glowed blue in the gathering dark as I typed 2 words into Google Solo Cruises. Outside, the sprinklers came on, painting rainbows in the twilight, exactly like the ones I'd pointed out to my children when they still believed I hung the moon. The phone buzzed again, Emily this time. "Mom, the venue needs final payment today. Can you Zelle me $3,500? Jason said you're being weird about money lately." I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. The morning sun glinted off Michael's wedding band, which I still wore on a chain around my neck. A memory flashed him holding a sobbing Emily after her first breakup, whispering, "You'll always be my girl." Now she only called when she needed something. I typed back no, then blocked her number. The credit card representative's voice was crisp through the speaker. "Ma'am, we've frozen the account. The disputed charges will be investigated, but—" She hesitated. "Your daughter may face legal consequences." I pictured Emily in her ivory wedding dress, the one she'd bought using my card while I ate canned soup for dinner. "Proceed," I said. At the bank, the manager arched an eyebrow when I withdrew $10,000 in cash, the last of Michael's insurance money. "Vacation plans," he joked. "Something like that," I replied, sliding the envelope into my purse. On my way out, I passed Jason's favorite coffee shop. Through the window, I saw him and Emily huddled over lattes, their laughter sharp as broken glass. Emily waved her phone, probably at my no, and Jason mimed an explosion. I kept walking. Back home, I dragged 2 suitcases from the attic. One for clothes, one for keepsakes, photo albums. Michael's letters, the porcelain dove he'd brought back from Italy. The rest could burn for all I cared. As I zipped the second bag, the doorbell rang. It was a process server. "Papers for you, ma'am," he said, handing me an envelope. Inside, a demand letter from Enchanted Gardens florist, pay $3,200 within 48 hours or face collections. Emily had listed me as the responsible party. I laughed so hard I cried. That night, I booked a one-way ticket to Santorini, the trip Michael and I had always postponed for someday. As the confirmation email chimed, the house phone rang. Jason's number flashed. I unplugged the landline. The taxi arrived at dawn. I paused on the porch, watching the sunrise paint the neighborhood gold. Somewhere inside, Jason's alarm would be buzzing. Emily would be panicking over her frozen funds. And for the first time in years, I didn't care. The cab driver took my bags. "Where to?" he asked. "Forward," I said. The hardware store clerk's hands were gnarled with arthritis as he handed me the deadbolt. "You know," he said, squinting at me under the fluorescent lights, "I changed my locks after my grandson stole my TV. Family's the first to take advantage." I nodded, thinking of Jason's borrowed tools that never returned Emily's temporary jewelry loans that became permanent. Back home, I drilled the new locks into place with a vengeance. The old ones, the ones Jason had a key to, went straight into the trash. As I tested the bolt, my landline rang. The caller ID showed Janet Morrison's office. "Sandy," Janet said, her voice tight. "Emily just called my receptionist. She's demanding to know if you've changed your will." I gripped the phone. "What did you tell her?" "That attorney-client privilege exists for a reason," Janet snorted. "But Sandy," she sounded desperate, "said if you cut her out, she'll sue for undue influence." I laughed so hard I nearly dropped the screwdriver. Let her try. The doorbell rang at exactly 3:17 p.m. Through the peephole, I saw Emily, flushed mascara smudged still in her silk bridal robe. "Mom, open up!" She pounded the door. "The venue just canceled. They said the payment bounced. Do you have any idea how humiliating—" I slid open the chain just enough to see her face. "I do, actually. Like when your daughter empties your life savings without asking." Emily's mouth opened, then closed. Behind her, Jason's BMW screeched into the driveway. He stormed up the walk-tie, loosened face red. "What the hell, Mom? My card got declined at lunch. The bank said you removed me from the accounts." Emily whirled on him. "You too!" She froze the credit card. "My wedding is ruined." They stood there on my porch, squawking like seagulls fighting over scraps until I cleared my throat. "You'll both want to check your emails," I said calmly. "I've sent itemized lists of what you owe me. Jason, $8,400 for temporary rent and car insurance. Emily, $22,700 for the wedding charges I'm disputing. Payment plans can be arranged." Jason's face twisted. "You're joking. After everything we've—" The roar of an engine cut him off. A U-Haul truck pulled up behind his BMW. 2 movers hopped out. "Ma'am," one called to me. "Here for the furniture pickup." Emily's eyes went wide. "What furniture?" I smiled, stepping aside to reveal the stack of boxes in the foyer. "Yours and Jason's. I've converted your bedrooms into a yoga studio and a library. Your things will be delivered to your apartments by end of day." As the movers carried out Jason's gaming system, the one he'd bought with my emergency fund last winter, Emily finally snapped. "You'll die alone," she shrieked. I closed the door, gently locking it with a satisfying click. Through the window, I watched them argue in the driveway, their shadows long in the afternoon sun. The U-Haul's engine rumbled to life. Somewhere in the house, the grandfather clock Michael had loved chimed 4 times. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat in my new reading nook where Jason's bed used to be, and opened the first page of a novel I'd been meaning to read for years. The silence for once was golden. The blender's hum died as Rebecca set it down, her manicured fingers leaving smudges on my stainless steel. "Sandy," she said in that faux therapist voice she'd picked up from her yoga retreats, "maybe we should all take a breath here. This energy feels really toxic." I took a slow sip of coffee, letting the silence stretch, until it became uncomfortable. 10 minutes, Rebecca, or your crystals go in the trash with the sage." Jerry slammed his hands on the counter. "What the actual fuck, Mom? First you screw with our money, now you're kicking us out." "Correction," I said, setting down my mug with deliberate calm. "I stopped letting you steal from me, and I'm reclaiming my space." I reached into my purse and slid a folded paper across the granite. "Here's your itemized bill. $4,200 for 6 months of unpaid utilities groceries, and that quick loan for your ski trip." Rebecca's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then did a double take. The venue just emailed me. They canceled our booking." Jerry's head whipped toward me. "You didn't." "Oh, I absolutely did." I opened my laptop to show the confirmation screen. Turns out Bella Vista's manager is a former student of mine. When I explained the charges were fraudulent, they refunded every penny. Rebecca made a strangled noise. "But our deposit was paid with stolen money, sweetheart." I turned to Jerry. "By the way, your landlord called. He's evicting you for unpaid rent. Again." The color drained from Jerry's face. "You told him?" "I simply confirmed you no longer have access to my accounts." I took another sip of coffee. He seemed relieved. Rebecca was already shoving her crystals into a tote bag. "I'm out. This is insane." "Rebecca, wait." Jerry grabbed her arm, but she shook him off. "Your mom's right. You're nearly 40 and still mooching off her." The door slammed behind her with finality. Jerry stood there, his designer shirt wrinkled, his phone buzzing with what I could only assume were panic texts from Emily. For a fleeting moment, I saw the little boy who used to cry when his ice cream fell before he learned tears could manipulate me. "Last chance," I said softly. "You can walk out that door and figure life out on your own terms, or stay and respect mine." He opened his mouth, then closed it. The front door didn't slam. This time it clicked shut with eerie quiet. Through the window, I watched him pace the driveway, yelling into his phone. Probably Emily. Probably plotting. Let them. I picked up the forgotten smoothie kale almond milk and $100 worth of organic supplements I'd paid for and poured it down the drain. Then I texted Janet add a no contest clause to the will and book me a spa day. Outside, Jerry's car peeled away, leaving tire marks on the asphalt. Inside, the house breathed easy for the first time in years. The scent of sage was already fading. The silence after Jerry left was deafening. I stood in the kitchen, running my fingers along the granite countertop, the one Michael had saved for months to surprise me with. A lifetime of memories echoed in this house. Birthday cakes decorated at this very island. Christmas mornings with wrapping paper strewn across these floors, the way Michael would sneak up behind me while I cooked and whisper something ridiculous just to make me laugh. Now it was just me. And for the first time, that didn't feel like a tragedy. My phone buzzed again, Zoe, no doubt. I swiped to block her number, then paused. Instead, I answered. Mom. Her voice was thick with tears. The florist just canceled the cake designer, won't return my calls. What did you do? I took a deep breath. I stopped letting you treat me like a bank, Zoe, and I suggest you start calling your bridesmaids to help cover costs. You're ruining my life, she shrieked. No, sweetheart, I said calmly. You did that yourself when you charged $18,500 to my card without asking. A beat of silence. Then in a small voice, you're really not going to help me. The old me would have crumbled at that tone. The new me simply said no. The line went dead. I grabbed my purse and headed to Janet's office. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the sidewalk, and for once I didn't hurry. Let them wait. Let them panic. Janet greeted me with a raised eyebrow. Sandy, your daughter has called my office 7 times. Add harassment to the list of charges we're filing, I said, settling into the leather chair across from her desk. As Janet outlined the legal steps to protect my assets, my phone lit up with a notification. A Venmo request from Jason, $200 for gas and groceries. I laughed aloud and showed Janet. She shook her head. Shall we make it official then? I nodded. By 5 p.m., the paperwork was signed, new will, financial power of attorney, even a restraining order drafted, and ready to file if needed. Janet walked me out, her hand warm on my shoulder. You know they'll come crawling back, right? Let them, I said, stepping into the golden light of sunset. I've already changed the locks. The drive home was peaceful. No urgent calls, no demands. Just the hum of the engine and the knowledge that for the first time in decades, I was truly free. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed a figure on my porch. Emily. Her face was puffy from crying. Her designer dress wrinkled. She held out a checkbook with trembling hands. Mom, she whispered, I think we need to talk. I took the keys from the ignition, smoothed my skirt, and prepared to have the hardest conversation of my life. But this time, I held all the cards. The leather chair creaked as I leaned forward, watching Janet's pen glide across legal documents that would rewrite my future. Outside, the city lights blinked to life, tiny beacons against the deepening twilight. Let me be clear, I said, tapping the fresh will. I want clauses requiring repayment of every cent they've taken before they see a dime of inheritance. And if they contest it, Janet's glasses flashed as she looked up. They forfeit everything. Standard no contest language. She slid another paper across the desk. This is the restraining order application. Given the financial abuse and today's harassment, we have grounds. My phone vibrated again, Jerry now. I silenced it without looking. Will they escalate? Janet asked gently. A memory surfaced Jerry at 16, punching a hole in his bedroom wall when I refused to buy him concert tickets. Probably, Janet nodded. Then let's make it airtight. We'll cite the fraudulent charges, the verbal threats today, and... She paused as her assistant knocked, entering with an envelope. This just came for you, Sandy. Inside was a handwritten note from Emily. Mom, I get it now. Can we talk? Just us, no Jerry, no wedding drama. Coffee tomorrow. Love, Zoe. Janet raised an eyebrow. The tone shift is suspicious. I traced the loopy signature, the same one she'd practiced at this very desk during parent-teacher conferences years ago. She's realized legal consequences are coming. Do you want to meet her? The old ache flared that desperate hope mothers carry even when we know better. Then I thought of the $18,500 the missed birthdays, the way she'd laughed when Jerry called me their human ATM. No, I said, refolding the note. But have your paralegal draft a formal repayment agreement. If she's serious, she can sign it before we speak. Janet smirked. Cold. I like it. She pulled out another form. One last thing, who gets your medical power of attorney now? The answer came effortlessly. My sister in Denver, the one my kids haven't spoken to since she called them entitled leeches at Thanksgiving. As I signed the papers, my phone lit up with a news alert: local bride's dream wedding canceled after funding falls through. Below the headline, a photo of Emily crying outside Bella Vista. Janet whistled. That was fast. I closed the file folder with finality. Let's see how fast they repay me when the world knows the truth. The night air was crisp as I left Janet's office. Across the street, a young mother struggled with a stroller while her toddler wailed. Our eyes met, and I surprised us both by smiling. It gets easier, I told her, and for the first time, I believed it. The lasagna was still warm between us, its rich aroma mingling with the crisp Pinot Grigio. Elizabeth's hands, weathered from gardening, gestured as she spoke about her daughter in Seattle, the one who sent organic teas every Christmas but hadn't visited in 2 years. I recognized that look in your eyes today, she said, swirling her wine. The moment a woman realizes she's been pouring from an empty cup. The truth of it hit me like a physical blow. Outside, the last streaks of sunset painted the kitchen in gold. Somewhere beyond my new deadbolt, Emily was probably drafting another pleading text. Jerry might be drinking away his anger at some bar. But here, at this table, there was only the quiet clink of cutlery and the unexpected comfort of being truly seen. You know, Elizabeth continued, I started volunteering at the senior center last month. They've got a book club that reads banned novels. Next week, we're discussing The Handmaid's Tale while knitting protest scarves. She grinned. It's delightfully subversive. I laughed, a real unguarded sound I hadn't heard from myself in years. That sounds terrifyingly fun. Come with me. She topped off our glasses. We've got a van pool, though fair warning Mabel from Oak Street smuggles in contraband Merlot in her knitting bag. The doorbell rang. We both froze. Through the side light, I saw Emily's silhouette backlit by the porch light. Her Audi was parked haphazardly behind Elizabeth's sensible sedan. Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. Want me to get rid of her? For a heartbeat, I considered it. Then I stood smoothing my sweater. No, but stay, please. Emily's face was blotchy when I opened the door. She held out her phone screen, glowing with a Venmo notification. Did you really just request $18,500 from me? Yes. I kept my voice steady. With 3% interest per the repayment plan my attorney emailed you. Her mouth worked soundlessly. Then she noticed Elizabeth watching from the kitchen wine glass in hand. Who's that? My friend, I said, savoring the word. We were just discussing next week's book club. Emily's eyes darted between us, realization dawning, that her tantrums no longer commanded center stage, that I'd built something, however small, that didn't include her. You'll get your money, she whispered. I know, I said. The court will make sure of it. As the taillights of her Audi disappeared down the street, Elizabeth appeared at my shoulder with 2 fresh glasses of wine. Well, she said, handing me one. I do believe we've earned the good stuff now. We clinked glasses beneath the porch light, its glow stretching our shadows long and lean across the lawn. 2 women, 2 stories, one unexpected beginning. The lasagna was still warm between us, its rich aroma mingling with the crisp Pinot Grigio. Elizabeth's hands, weathered from gardening, gestured as she spoke about her daughter in Seattle, the one who sent organic teas every Christmas but hadn't visited in 2 years. I recognize that look in your eyes today, she said, swirling her wine. The moment a woman realizes she's been pouring from an empty cup. The truth of it hit me like a physical blow. Outside, the last streaks of sunset painted the kitchen in gold. Somewhere beyond my new deadbolt, Emily was probably drafting another pleading text. Jerry might be drinking away his anger at some bar. But here, at this table, there was only the quiet clink of cutlery and the unexpected comfort of being truly seen. You know, Elizabeth continued, I started volunteering at the senior center last month. They've got a book club that reads banned novels. Next week, we're discussing The Handmaid's Tale while knitting protest scarves. She grinned. It's delightfully subversive. I laughed, a real unguarded sound I hadn't heard from myself in years. That sounds terrifyingly fun. Come with me. She topped off our glasses. We've got a van pool, though fair warning, Mabel from Oak Street smuggles in contraband Merlot in her knitting bag. The doorbell rang. We both froze. Through the sidelight, I saw Emily's silhouette backlit by the porch light. Her Audi was parked haphazardly behind Elizabeth's sensible sedan. Elizabeth raised an eyebrow. Want me to get rid of her? For a heartbeat, I considered it. Then I stood smoothing my sweater. No, but stay, please. Emily's face was blotchy when I opened the door. She held out her phone screen, glowing with a Venmo notification. Did you really just request $18,500 from me? Yes. I kept my voice steady. With 3% interest per the repayment plan my attorney emailed you. Her mouth worked soundlessly. Then she noticed Elizabeth watching from the kitchen wineglass in hand. Who's that? My friend, I said, savoring the word. We were just discussing next week's book club. Emily's eyes darted between us, realization dawning. That her tantrums no longer commanded center stage. That I'd built something, however small, that didn't include her. You'll get your money, she whispered. I know, I said. The court will make sure of it. As the taillights of her Audi disappeared down the street, Elizabeth appeared at my shoulder with 2 fresh glasses of wine. Well, she said, handing me one. I do believe we've earned the good stuff now. We clinked glasses beneath the porch light, its glow stretching our shadows long and lean across the lawn. 2 women, 2 stories, 1 unexpected beginning. The phone vibrated against the countertop. Jerry's name flashing like a warning light. I dried my hands, slowly watching as the call went to voicemail. A moment later, my screen lit up with a text. Mom, we need to talk. Emily's hysterical. You've gone too far this time. Elizabeth's lasagna dish caught the overhead light as I placed it in the sink. Too far. As if setting boundaries was some unforgivable offense, not the basic right of any human being. The phone buzzed again, a photo this time. Emily in her wedding dress, tear-streaked makeup, holding up a canceled contract from Bella Vista. The caption, "Look what you did." I traced the edge of my wine glass, remembering the day Emily had tried on that dress. How she'd twirled in front of the mirror, giggling while the consultant fawned over her. Don't worry, Mom, she'd said when I blanched at the $4,000 price tag. You can put it on the card. A new message popped up, call me, or I swear to God. I blocked his number. The house sighed around me, the hum of the refrigerator, the creak of old floorboards settling. For years, I'd mistaken silence for loneliness. Now I understood it was peace. I opened my laptop and typed an email to Janet. Let's move forward with the restraining order and add a clause to the will. Any contested claims result in automatic donation of their share to the Literacy Foundation. As I hit send, the doorbell rang. Not the frantic pounding from earlier, just a single hesitant chime. Through the peephole, I saw Elizabeth holding 2 mugs of steaming tea, her gardening gloves tucked under one arm. Thought you might want reinforcements, she said when I opened the door, nodding toward my phone on the counter. Saw the headlights when that boy came speeding down the street. I took the mug, the warmth seeping into my fingers. He's not staying. Good. Elizabeth kicked off her muddy boots. Now tell me, do you prefer Agatha Christie or Sue Grafton for our book club's mystery month? Outside, the wind rattled the last autumn leaves from the trees. Inside, we sat at the kitchen island, the same spot where I'd once served endless meals to ungrateful children and debated the merits of cozy mysteries versus hard-boiled detective novels. Somewhere in the night, a car door slammed, an engine roared away. Neither of us looked up. The morning air was crisp as I stood in the doorway watching my daughter unravel on my porch. Zoe's designer purse lay discarded beside her, its gold hardware glinting in the sunlight like some cruel joke. Inside that purse probably held lipsticks that cost more than my weekly grocery budget. "I can't do this without you," she sobbed, clutching her phone like a lifeline. "Tyler's parents are furious. They think I misled them about who was paying for what." I sipped my coffee, letting the bitterness linger on my tongue. "And what did you tell them?" Her silence was answer enough. A text notification popped up on her screen. "Tyler, my dad says, if your mom doesn't cover the venue, we're postponing." Zoe's head snapped up. "You see, you're ruining my life." The words should have cut deeper. Instead, I felt something unexpected relief, as if her tantrum was finally confirming every hard decision I'd made this week. "You have options," I said, stepping aside to let her in. "You could scale back. Courthouse wedding, potluck reception. That's what your father and I did." She recoiled like I'd suggested murder. "Are you serious? I'm not some trailer trash bride." The coffee maker beeped in the kitchen. I turned my back on her, pouring a second cup out of habit before catching myself. Old instincts died hard. "Then get a loan," I said, leaving the extra cup on the counter. "Banks love teachers with stable jobs." Zoe's phone rang Tyler again. She rejected the call with shaking fingers. "You know, I can't get approved for that much. My credit score is ruined." I raised an eyebrow. "Funny how that happens when you max out other people's cards." The doorbell rang. Through the sidelight, I saw Elizabeth holding 2 to-go cups from the cafe down the street. Her timing was impeccable. Zoe stiffened. "Who's that?" "My book club buddy," I said, unlocking the door. "We're discussing Educated today. You'd like it. It's about a woman who learns to think for herself." Elizabeth took one look at Zoe's smudged eyeliner and handed me a coffee. "Extra espresso. Figured you'd need it." Zoe's jaw worked silently as she processed this, her mother with plans, with friends, with a life that didn't revolve around her crises. "I'll give you one last chance," she hissed, grabbing her purse. "Transfer the money by noon or you're dead to me." Elizabeth whistled as the door slammed. That girl's got a future in villain monologues. I took a long sip of coffee. The bitterness was gone, replaced by something unexpectedly sweet. "Funny," I said. "I was just thinking the same thing about my future." Outside, Zoe's tires screeched down the street. Inside, Elizabeth and I settled at the kitchen table with our books and a plate of untouched toast. Somewhere a wedding was collapsing. And for the first time in decades, I wasn't the one holding the broom. Zoe's hands clenched around her phone, her manicure digging into the case. "You're really choosing some random book club lady over your own daughter." The morning sun caught the silver in my hair as I stood. "I'm choosing myself, Zoe, for the first time in 31 years. She opened her mouth, another plea, another threat, but I held up a hand. "Let me tell you what's going to happen," I said, my voice steady. "You're going to tell David the truth today, all of it. The credit card, the venue cancellation, everything. And then the two of you will figure it out like adults." Zoe's laugh was hollow. "You think he'll still marry me when he finds out I'm broke?" I thought of David's kind eyes when he'd helped me carry groceries last winter, how he'd asked about my arthritis without pity. If he's the man I think he is, he'll care more about the lying than the money. Her phone buzzed another text from Tyler. The screen cracked slightly under her grip. "You have 2 choices," I continued. "Come clean and salvage what you can, or keep lying and lose everything." For a moment, Zoe's mask slipped. Beneath the entitlement, I saw the little girl who used to cry when her ice cream fell before she learned tears could be weapons. "You win," she whispered. "No, sweetheart." I reached for the door. "We both do." As I closed it behind her, Elizabeth's text chimed again. "Swing by when you're ready. Baked scones. Brought extra butter." Through the window, I watched Zoe sit in her car for a long time, staring at her reflection in the rearview mirror. When she finally drove away, it wasn't toward Tyler's apartment, but in the direction of David's office. The kitchen clock ticked toward noon. Somewhere a wedding was being reimagined. Somewhere a daughter was facing hard truths. And here, in this quiet house with its new locks and stronger doors, a mother was finally free. I grabbed my purse and Elizabeth's scone recipe card, the first page in a new chapter. David stood on my porch, his shoulders slumped under a Patagonia jacket, the same one I'd seen Zoe buy with my card last Christmas. The afternoon light caught the worry lines around his eyes deeper than they should have been for a man of 32. "Come in," I said, holding the door wider. "You look like you could use some coffee." He hesitated. "Zoe doesn't know I'm here." "That makes two of us with secrets, then." The coffee maker gurgled as David sat at the kitchen island spinning his wedding band nervously. "Mrs. Patterson, Sandy, I need to ask you something uncomfortable." I slid his mug across the counter. "Ask. Was there ever really a wedding fund?" The question hung between us. Outside, a squirrel chattered in the oak tree Donald had planted when Zoe was born. "No," I said quietly. "Just a credit card she had access to, one I foolishly thought she'd only use for emergencies." David's knuckles whitened around his mug. "She showed me spreadsheets, venue deposits, floral contracts, all marked Mom's contribution. I thought—" His voice broke. "I thought we were partners." The hurt in his eyes was familiar. I'd seen it in the mirror every morning for years. "What else has she lied about?" he asked, almost to himself. I reached into the junk drawer and pulled out a folder. Inside were printouts, the disputed charges, Zoe's frantic texts, even the florist's angry voicemail. David flipped through them with growing horror. $18,500. Jesus. And the honeymoon flights to Bali, charged last Tuesday. He set down the papers with trembling hands. "I need to think. Maybe postpone the—" The front door burst open. Zoe stood there, her face blotchy with tears and rage. "David, what the hell are you doing here?" David stood slowly, the papers clutched in his fist. "Getting the truth. Something you should have given me months ago." Zoe's eyes darted to the folder, then to me. "You bitch!" David flinched like she'd struck him. "That's your mother. And she's ruining everything." Zoe shrieked, grabbing the folder and hurling it across the room. Papers fluttered like wounded birds. David watched them fall. When he spoke, his voice was eerily calm. "We're done." As he walked out, Zoe turned on me, her finger jabbing the air. "Happy now you've destroyed my life." "No, sweetheart," I said, stepping over the scattered papers. "You did that all by yourself." The door slammed behind her. The house exhaled. And in the quiet that followed, I picked up the phone and dialed Elizabeth. "Bring the Merlot," I said. "I've got quite the story for book club." Somewhere beyond my new deadbolt, a wedding was ending before it began. And somewhere inside this house, with its fresh locks and stronger doors, a new life was just getting started. Elizabeth nearly choked on her lo mein. "Incompetent because you won't bankroll their lifestyles." She poured more wine, shaking her head. "Honey, if common sense was grounds for commitment, your kids would have been institutionalized years ago." The phone buzzed again. Zoe this time, her text screaming in all caps. "David left me happy now." I showed Elizabeth, who snorted. "She really thinks this is about her." I typed back no, but I am relieved he finally saw the truth. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, then reappeared. "Finally, you'll regret this when you're rotting alone in some nursing home." Elizabeth grabbed my phone and snapped a photo of our takeout feast, the steaming containers, our half-drunk wine glasses, the stack of travel brochures for Santorini I'd picked up that morning. She sent it with the caption, "Current nursing home conditions." Terrible. My phone exploded with incoherent rage texts. We muted it and clinked glasses. "You know what's funny?" I said, unfolding a brochure. "All these years I thought cutting them off would feel like losing something, but it just feels lighter." Elizabeth nodded toward the chaos of notifications still flooding my silenced phone. "They're not going quietly." "No," I agreed, tracing the azure waters of the Aegean in the brochure. "But I'm done listening to the noise." The doorbell rang an insistent, angry buzz. Through the peephole, I saw Jerry pacing his phone pressed to his ear, probably calling Zoe for backup. Elizabeth arched an eyebrow. "Want me to handle this?" I thought of all the times I'd smoothed things over, made excuses, swallowed my hurt to keep the peace. Then I reached for the deadbolt, not to open it, but to double lock it. "Let him rot," I said, returning to my wine. Outside, Jerry kicked the door once hard. The framed photo of him as a little leaguer rattled on the wall. Then silence. Inside, Elizabeth and I toasted to new beginnings and the exquisite peace of finally choosing ourselves. Somewhere beyond my locked door, a storm was raging. And for the first time in decades, I was perfectly dry. David set the envelope on the wrought iron patio table, the same table where Michael and I used to drink our Sunday coffee. His hands were steady, but the shadows under his eyes told a different story. "I called off the wedding," he said without preamble. "Zoe and I, we're done." The ice cubes clinked in my glass as I set it down. "I'm sorry, David." "Don't be." He ran a hand through his hair, thinner, now streaked with premature gray. Turns out the credit card was just the tip of the iceberg. Student loans she never mentioned. A shopping addiction. Even... He hesitated, then slid the envelope toward me. Inside were printouts of emails Zoe discussing me with Jerry like I was some senile old woman. Mom's losing it. Gonna bleed her dry before she changes the will. That bitch Elizabeth better watch her back. My fingers trembled against the paper. Not from hurt, but from something sharper vindication. "I found these when I canceled our shared cloud storage," David said quietly. "Thought you should know what you're dealing with." The roses swayed in the breeze, their perfume mixing with the scent of fresh-cut grass. Somewhere down the street, children laughed on their swings. "What will you do now?" I asked. David exhaled. "Start over, I guess. Got a job offer in Seattle." He met my eyes. But first I wanted to apologize for not seeing it sooner, for being part of... He gestured to the emails. I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "You were the best part of that mess, David." His smile was sad but genuine. "Zoe's moving back in with Jerry, by the way. They've got some scheme to contest your... competency." I finished laughing. Janet's already prepared for that. We sat in comfortable silence as the sunset painted the garden gold. When David left, he hugged me a real hug, the kind sons give mothers. That night, as I deadbolted the door, a habit, now my phone buzzed. Elizabeth heard the news. "Bring the wine tomorrow. We're celebrating your garden and your freedom." I texted back, "Bring the Merlot. I'll bring the emails." Upstairs, Michael's old suitcase waited in the closet, dusted off and ready. Santorini wasn't just a dream anymore. Somewhere across town, my children were plotting. And here in this quiet house with its thriving roses and new locks, their mother was finally blessedly moving on. The check fluttered slightly in the evening breeze as I traced the numbers with my finger, $500 more than I'd ever expected to see again. David's signature was firm and clear, unlike the shaky forgery Zoe had used on the catering contract. Elizabeth appeared at the garden gate, her pruning shears dangling from one hand. "Well?" she asked, nodding toward the check. "I'm donating it," I said without hesitation. "To that literacy program Janet mentioned, in David's name." Elizabeth's smile was brighter than the sunset. "Perfect." She pulled something from her pocket, a brochure for a Mediterranean cruise. "Now that we've settled that, how do you feel about sailing in September?" The brochure showed azure waters and whitewashed villas, the kind of trip Michael and I had always talked about taking one day. I said, folding David's check into my pocket, "like it's about damn time." My phone buzzed on the table, another unknown number. Probably Zoe or Jerry having burned through their blocked contacts. I silenced it without looking. Elizabeth raised her glass. "To new horizons." The clink of our glasses carried across the garden, mingling with the chirp of evening crickets. Somewhere beyond the fence, life went on: mortgages and marriages, disappointments and fresh starts. But here, in this quiet corner of the world, two women sat in contented silence, the past finally laid to rest, and the future stretching before them, wide and glittering as the sea. The check in my pocket wasn't closure, but it was a damn good beginning. Zoe's hands clenched at her sides. Her manicure chipped something I'd never seen before. "You always do this," she hissed. "Make everything into some lesson." The porch light flickered, casting shadows across her face. For the first time, I noticed the faint lines around her eyes, not from laughter, but from years of entitlement hardening into resentment. "I'm not teaching anymore, Zoe," I said, setting my book aside. "I'm simply refusing to be your student." She flinched like I'd struck her. Melissa's car radio played softly in the driveway, the bass line thumping like a distant heartbeat. "Fine," Zoe's voice cracked. "But answer me this, if Dad were here, would you be acting like this?" The night air turned to ice in my lungs. Michael's name in her mouth felt like sacrilege. If your father were here, I said slowly, he would have cut you off years ago. Zoe recoiled. The truth, it seemed, still had the power to shock her. Melissa leaned out the car window. Zoe, you okay? Zoe didn't answer. She just stared at me, really looked at me perhaps for the first time in her adult life. Not as an ATM, not as a prop in her narrative, but as a person. What happened to you? She whispered. I stood, the wicker chair creaking beneath me. I woke up. The cicadas hummed in the oak tree as she turned away, her footsteps heavy on the gravel path. Melissa's car door slammed. The engine roared to life. And then, silence. Elizabeth appeared at the garden gate, 2 glasses of lemonade in hand. Heard most of that, she admitted. You okay? I took the glass, the condensation cool against my palm. Strangely, yes. We sat watching fireflies dance over the lawn where Zoe had once played tag with Jerry, where Michael had grilled burgers on summer nights, where a family that no longer existed had once laughed together. Elizabeth squeezed my hand. She'll be back. I know, I said. But next time, if there was a next time, it would be on my terms. Not as a doormat, not as a bank, but as a woman who'd finally learned her own worth. The lemonade was tart and sweet, the night air thick with jasmine. Somewhere beyond the porch, light life went on. And here in its golden circle, so did I. Duncan from across the street waved as she watered her roses, the same ones she'd offered to teach me how to prune last spring, back when I was too busy putting out my children's fires to notice. This time, I waved back and called out, "Those are gorgeous. Would you show me how you get them to bloom like that?" Her surprised smile was its own kind of gift. The coffee shop buzzed with midday chatter when I arrived. Elizabeth sat at our usual corner table with a silver-haired woman who looked up with warm, curious eyes. "Sandy, this is Claire," Elizabeth said, "retired biology teacher, fellow book lover, and someone who's heard all about your courage." Claire finished pushing a latte toward me. "Elizabeth says you're planning a Mediterranean cruise." As we talked about books about widowhood, about the strange freedom that comes when you stop pouring yourself into bottomless cups, I realized something remarkable. I wasn't waiting for my phone to ring. Not with apologies, not with emergencies, not even with promises of change. Jerry and Zoe would either grow or they wouldn't. But for the first time in 34 years, my happiness didn't depend on their choices. Elizabeth caught my eye over Claire's shoulder and raised her mug in a silent toast. Outside, sunlight glinted off passing cars, off shop windows, off the simple gold band I still wore beside my wedding ring. The coffee was rich, the conversation easy, and the future, well, the future was mine. The garden shears glinted in the sunlight as I trimmed the last stray branch from my rose bushes. Elizabeth's laughter carried from the patio where she and Claire were debating which book to pick for next month's club, something bold, they agreed, maybe even scandalous. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from Jerry Mom, "Can we talk?" 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. Then finally, not about money, just talk. I wiped my hands on my gardening jeans, leaving streaks of earth across the denim. The roses stood tall beside me, their petals velvety against my fingertips, no longer fragile things, but resilient, rooted. Elizabeth looked up, questioning. I held up the phone with a small smile. "Take your time," she called, pouring me a glass of the lemonade we'd made that morning. "We're not going anywhere." The sun warmed my shoulders as I typed my reply, "I'm here when you're ready to begin." Not an end, not a surrender. Just a quiet opening like the roses outside my window, patient, hopeful, and finally free to grow as they were meant to.